Before London was a metropolis of steel and screens, before the fog of empire rolled in from the Thames, there stood a fortress born of conquest, ambition, and iron will. The Tower of London is not merely a building. It is a living archive of England's soul, etched in blood, whispered in nightmares, and haunted by the footsteps of those who once wore crowns only to lose their heads beneath them. In 1066, William the Conqueror, fresh from his victory at Hastings, needed more than swords to hold England. He needed symbolism, a structure, so imposing it would cow Saxon rebels and declare Norman dominance forever. And so, on the ruins of Roman Londinium, he raised the White Tower, stark, square, and merciless. It was the nucleus of what would become the Tower of London, a concentric labyrinth of walls, moats, dungeons, and chapels that evolved over 9 centuries into a palace, prison, mint, zoo, armory, and tomb. But for all its grandeur, the tower's most enduring legacy is not gold or glory. It is grief. Specifically, the grief of queens who entered its gates as sovereigns and left only as ghosts. Anne Boleyn, the woman who shattered Christendom. She was never meant to be queen, but she changed the world. Anne Boleyn, with her sharp wit and continental flair, captured the heart, or perhaps the obsession, of Henry VIII. To marry her, he broke from Rome, dissolved monasteries, and birthed the Church of England. And yet, when she failed to produce a male heir, that same love curdled into paranoia and rage. Accused of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother Anne, was condemned in a trial widely seen as a farce. On the 19th of May, 1536, she walked from her rooms in the Queen's house to the scaffold on Tower Green. She wore a crimson petticoat red, the color of martyrdom. She joked that her little neck would make the executioner's work easy. Her death was swift, but her legacy was eternal. Her daughter, Elizabeth, would become England's greatest monarch. Yeah, Anne never truly departed. Visitors report a headless woman in Tudor dress pacing the corridors. In 1876, a guard claimed to see her standing by the White Tower, holding her severed head. Even today, ravens are said to gather and grow silent whenever her presence returns. Catherine Howard, the girl who danced into darkness. 6 years later, another teenage bride entered the tower, but not as a prisoner. At first, she was queen. Catherine Howard, cousin to Anne Boleyn, was barely 19. Beautiful, impulsive, and tragically naive. Married to a king whose ulcerous leg oozed as much as his jealousy, she sought affection elsewhere and paid with her life. When her past indiscretions, and possibly ongoing ones, were exposed, she was dragged from Hampton Court screaming, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper," a reference to her alleged lover. On the 13th of February, 1542, she was brought to the Tower. The night before her execution, she practiced placing her head on a block made of prayer books. At dawn, she mounted the scaffold, whispered a prayer, and was gone. Her ghost is among the most active. Warders in the 19th century reported hearing a woman's shriek echoing through the Queen's house. Others claimed to see a young woman in white running through the gallery where she was arrested, still pleading, "Mercy, mercy." Lady Jane Grey, the scholar on the scaffold, the 9 days queen, never asked for the crown. A brilliant Protestant scholar, fluent in Greek and Hebrew, Jane was manipulated by her father and the Duke of Northumberland into accepting the throne after Edward VI's death. She ruled from the tower itself, proclaimed queen from its balcony, only to be overthrown by Mary Tudor, the rightful heir. Imprisoned in the same rooms where she'd been queen, Jane wrote letters of profound faith and resignation. On the 12th of February, 1554, she was led to a private scaffold erected within the tower walls to avoid public sympathy. Blindfolded, she fumbled for the block, asking softly, "What shall I do? Where is it?" A bystander guided her hands. Her last words, "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit." She was 16, or perhaps 17. No one is certain. History stole her name, her life, and her grave, but not her presence. The White Lady is seen near the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, often weeping. Some say she appears only on the anniversary of her death, standing beneath a bare winter tree, clutching a book. The tower does not forget. Its very air seems to vibrate with memory. The Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula holds the bones of Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey, and Thomas More stacked in a single vault beneath the altar. Tourists walk over them unknowingly. Yet, at night, the chapel grows cold, and candles flicker without wind. The Traitor's Gate, once the dreaded entrance for prisoners arriving by barge, still echoes with the cries of those who knew they'd never leave. Sir Thomas More passed through it. So did Elizabeth I, as a prisoner before she became queen. The yeoman warders' beefeaters tell stories passed down for generations. One 19th century guard swore he saw two headless women holding hands near the Salt Tower. Another claimed a spectral bear from the tower's former royal menagerie charged him only to vanish through a wall. Even the ravens seem aware. Legend says the kingdom falls if they leave, but perhaps they stay not for superstition but to bear witness. Why do we return again and again to this place of dread? Because the tower is not just history, it is humanity. It reflects our hunger for power, our capacity for cruelty, and our desperate need for redemption. It shows how easily love becomes obsession, loyalty becomes treason, and justice becomes vengeance. And in its shadows, the queens remind us, no crown is heavy enough to protect you from the blade. No throne is sacred when the king fears you. No silence is final when memory refuses to die. Today, the tower closes at dusk. Lights dim. Tourists file out. The last beefeater locks the gates and salutes the ravens. But as midnight tolls, the wind off the Thames carries whispers through the battlements. On Tower Green, three figures sometimes gather cloaked in Tudor velvet, faces pale but proud. They do not speak, they do not weep. They simply stand, gazing toward the river, as if waiting for a world that finally understands. And if you listen, truly listen, you might hear it. The rustle of silk, the sigh of a girl who never grew old, the echo of an axe that fell, and the silence that followed. They are still here, and they remember everything.